I'm Maris Keaton, 68. If I ever imagined my son's wedding, I pictured myself in the back row, watching quietly. I never imagined the bride would raise her hand and strike me across the face in front of everyone. The sound came first, a sharp crack that echoed through the hall. My head snapped to the side, and the crystal flute slipped from my fingers. It shattered across the polished floor, scattering bright shards that skittered into the silence. The quartet stopped mid-note. Conversations died. Even the air felt stunned. My cheek burned hot. 4 fingers and a thumb were already blooming in my skin when I lifted a shaking hand to it. Aurelia stood in front of me, her white gown darkened by the champagne I had accidentally spilled. Her face was twisted with anger. "What is wrong with you?" she hissed. "Do you know what you have done?" "I am so sorry," I whispered. I was only trying to help the boy with the tray. "Do not talk to me." She cut me off with a flick of her hand. "You ruined my dress." "I do not even know how you got in." Staff belongs in the back. Staff. I had been many kinds of staff in my life, but never spoken to like that. My knees bent out of instinct. "You break something." "You clean it." I reached for the glass. "Do not touch it," she snapped. "You will scratch the floor. Someone will clean it. That is what they are paid for." The security guard stepped toward me. Phones lifted. A ripple ran through the crowd. Curiosity, judgment, distance. "Get her out of here," Aurelia said, voice rising. "I do not want her near my guests." Heat crawled up my neck. I stared at the shards instead of the eyes staring at me. And then Aurelia. My son's voice cut through the room, cold, sharp. "What?" he said, walking toward us. "Did you just do—" The guard froze. The crowd shifted. And for the first time since the slap, I lifted my head. My son was coming toward me, and nothing in that room would be the same again. Chapter 2. Apologize to my mother. Now. Evan's footsteps cut through the silence quick, controlled, each one heavy with a kind of anger I had never heard from him. I stayed on the floor because my legs were still unsteady. My cheek throbbed. He reached me and lowered himself to one knee. "Mom," he said softly. "Are you hurt?" The word mom stopped conversations mid-breath. Phones dipped. Even the security guard froze. "I just lost my balance," I whispered. "That is not what happened." Evan stood and offered me his hand. I took it, and he pulled me gently to my feet. Eyes across the room flicked between us, recalculating everything they thought I was. Aurelia's face drained. "Evan, I did not know she was kneeling, and I thought she looked like what he asked." His voice was calm, too calm. Like she was cleaning, the glass was everywhere. Anyone would have reacted. "You slapped her," he said. "My dress is ruined." She snapped. "This cost more than—" "She is my mother." The room rippled with gasps. Aurelia swallowed hard. "I did not know. Evan, I swear." She did not introduce herself, and she was standing away from everyone. "I thought she was staff." "You greeted her," he said. "Twice." Her gaze darted around the room, phones recording, guests whispering, her parents staring at her like strangers. Panic slid across her face. "I was overwhelmed," she murmured. "There is so much pressure today. You controlled your hand well enough." Evan stepped closer. "Apologize to my mother." Her mask cracked. "Do not make a scene." She hissed. "You made the scene," he replied. "Fix it." Aurelia's father stiffened. Her mother looked away. Aurelia's lips parted, but pride clenched her throat shut. No apology came. Evan inhaled slowly. "Very well. The reception ends here." A shocked murmur swept the room. The musicians stilled. Caterers froze mid-step. Aurelia's voice trembled. "Evan, you would not." "You hit my mother," he said. He climbed the short steps to the microphone. A burst of feedback, then silence. "Thank you for coming," he told the room. "The reception is over." He set the microphone down and returned to me. His hand rested gently at the small of my back as the crowd parted. We walked toward the exit, the weight of 100 eyes following us. Aurelia's stare clung to me, furious, frightened, unraveling. And as the doors closed behind us, something inside me shifted. Heavy and unavoidable. I grew up in Pittsburgh long before the glass towers and tech companies tried to smooth over what the city had been. When Evan was little, the air still carried the smell of iron and oil, like the ghost of steel clinging to everything it touched. My husband, Henry, worked in one of the last plants that had not closed yet. He came home every night covered in metal dust, and I would brush it from his sleeves before it settled into the furniture. By the time Evan turned 8, the plant announced it was shutting down. I remember Henry sitting at the kitchen table that night, elbows on his knees, hands hanging between his legs, like he could not figure out what to do with them. They said they tried. Maris, he said the contracts dried up, said it is not personal. He looked at our son, who was finishing homework on the living room floor, humming the way he always did when he was absorbed in something. "I have to find something," Henry said quietly. "Anything." He did. A warehouse. A delivery job. A temporary position repairing machinery. Each one lasted a little while and then disappeared, like the whole city was slowly swallowing its own workers and spitting them back out. The neighborhood changed with it. Houses that had held families for generations went dark. Grocery stores closed. Kids Evan's age moved away in clusters. Whole families chasing jobs to Ohio, Indiana. Anywhere the lights looked brighter. There was one winter I will never forget. Evan was 10, and the furnace broke during a cold snap that lasted nearly a month. Henry was between jobs again. And every repair company told us the same thing: too expensive, too many calls, maybe next week. I slept in the living room with Evan beside me, both of us wrapped in coats and blankets, listening to the creak of the pipes and Henry pacing the hall because he could not sleep. He died the next year, one bad fall at a temporary site. Then complications. Then bills higher than anything we had ever imagined. I paid what I could. I argued. I begged. None of it changed the numbers printed on those sheets of paper. After he passed, it was just me and Evan in a house that felt too big and too cold. I took the diner job first, the morning shift. I learned how to flip eggs one-handed while pouring coffee with the other. Then I added the evening cleaning job because the mortgage would not wait. And then the sewing work because Evan needed school supplies and decent shoes. I never told him how tight things were. I never wanted him to look at me and see limitation. What mattered was keeping him moving forward, even while the city around us felt like it was shrinking into itself. One night, when Evan was about 12, he came home with a flyer from school. A science club needed a small fee for supplies. Only $20. But $20 was the kind of number that could unbalance an entire week. He held the flyer out to me. "Mom, I do not have to do it if it is too much." The careful way he said it, the way his eyes darted to my hands as if he could see right through my pockets, tore something open in me. "You go ahead," I told him. "I will take care of it." He smiled, then a small, grateful smile that made every ache worth it. Pittsburgh raised me to be tough. It raised me to survive. But as the years pushed forward and the city kept crumbling around us, I learned something else. Toughness does not pay for school fees, and survival does not keep a boy fed. Evan was growing. The city was not. Something had to give. I grew up in Pittsburgh long before anyone called it a tech hub. Back then, the city pulsed with steel, sweat, and the kind of pride that comes from knowing your work keeps other people's lights on. My husband, Henry, carried that pride in his shoulders every time he walked through the door after a shift. Evan used to run to him, arms wide, and Henry would laugh, lift him up, and shake the metal dust from his jacket before it settled on the floor. By the time Evan reached 8, the world around us had started to change. The mill where Henry worked announced its closure on a gray Monday morning. He came home early, lunchbox still full, eyes hollowed out. They shut it down. He said, just like that. Said we should have seen it coming. I sat across from him at the table, fingers still damp from washing breakfast dishes. What are we going to do? He rubbed his face. I will find something. Has to be something. He found jobs. Yes, but none that stayed. A warehouse that folded after 3 months, a maintenance job that cut its hours in half, a delivery route that ended when the company relocated. Every time he lost one, he tried to hide it from Evan. Every time. I found him sitting in the kitchen late at night, staring at his hands as if he no longer knew what they were meant to do. Our neighborhood changed with him. Houses emptied. Corner stores pulled down their shutters for the last time. The sounds of kids playing on the street thinned out until Evan's laughter echoed alone. 1 February. The furnace broke during the coldest stretch of winter. No one would come out unless we paid overtime fees that might as well have been $200 for every hour. Henry paced the living room in circles. Evan and I bundled ourselves in coats and blankets, breathing little clouds into the air. We will figure it out. Henry kept saying, I promise. He meant it. He tried. But the world took the ground out from under his feet. A fall at a temporary site. A surgery we could not afford. Complications that spiraled faster than we could grasp. The bills came in envelopes that grew heavier by the week. Then came the day when Evan and I stood in a cold hospital room and Henry lay still, his lungs refusing to work any longer. After the funeral, it was just me and my boy in a house that suddenly felt 3 times too large. I took the diner job first. The owner, Mrs. O'Hara, looked at my hands and said, "You can handle a tray. You start tomorrow." Then I added the evening job cleaning offices downtown, then sewing work for neighbors. Evan would sometimes wake up and catch me mending shirts at the kitchen table. "You do not have to stay up," he would whisper. "I am almost done." I would say, hiding the stack of clothes behind me. He saw more than I wanted him to. Children always do. The city shrank while Evan grew. He needed more than Pittsburgh had left to offer. He needed opportunity, teachers, safety, a future broader than a street full of darkened houses and for sale signs. One afternoon, Evan brought home a slip from school about a science club fee. "It is $20, he said. "But it is okay if you give it to your teacher tomorrow," I cut in. "You are joining?" His shoulders dropped with relief. "Thanks, Mom," as he walked away. Clutching the paper, I felt the weight of the city pressing against my back. Empty mills, quiet streets, jobs vanishing like smoke. Pittsburgh had built our family for generations. But it was no longer strong enough to hold my son. After Henry died, the house did not wait for grief to settle. Bills kept coming. The mortgage kept ticking, and Evan kept growing. I learned quickly that sorrow did not excuse the electric company or the grocery store. So I stitched my life into shifts, morning at the diner, evenings cleaning offices downtown, and late nights bent over a sewing machine that rattled like it was older than I was. Mrs. O'Hara, the diner owner, met me at the door on my first day back. "You sure you are ready?" "Maris, I do not have a choice," I said. She nodded once. The kind of nod women give when they have carried too much themselves. "All right then. Table 3 needs coffee." By 9 in the morning, my feet were pulsing. Men in steel-toed boots sat in the booths, talking about factories that had closed and rumors that more were next. The tips were small pennies, nickels, the occasional crumpled dollar, and I swept them into my apron pocket like they were pearls. during a lull. Mrs. O'Hara brushed past me and paused. Your hands, she said softly. They are cracking. I will put lotion on, I replied. She shook her head. Lotion will not fix hunger. Honey. Then she walked away, leaving me with a coffee pot and a truth I did not know how to swallow. After finishing the diner shift, I drove straight to the office building downtown. The manager, a tall man named Briggs, barely looked at me as he handed me a spray bottle and a rag. Trash out nightly. He said, desks every other night. No noise after 8. I understand. He glanced at my name on the sheet. You are new. No, I said. Just starting again. He shrugged and walked off, leaving me alone with rows of empty desks and a vacuum that rattled like loose teeth. I moved through the rooms quietly, picking up coffee cups, wiping fingerprints from glass, and tying heavy trash bags that bit into my palms. Each tie dug deeper into skin already split from hot dishwater at the diner. By the time I got home, Evan was usually asleep. I would peek into his room and see him curled up, school books still open beside him. Sometimes he mumbled things in his sleep dates. Equations, words he had read that day, had. I would stand in the doorway until the sound of his gentle breathing steadied something inside me. Then I sat at the sewing machine. The lamp on the kitchen table cast a yellow circle of light over piles of jeans with torn knees, jackets with missing buttons, and dresses needing hems lowered or raised. Neighbors left them in a bag on the porch. Payment was whatever they could spare. Around midnight, the needle pricked my finger. A small, bright bead of blood rose. I pressed my thumb against it and shook my head. Not now, I murmured. My hands looked older than the rest of me read. Cracked. Raw in the winter air. I rubbed ointment across the knuckles and blew on them to ease the sting. I hated the thought of Evan seeing them. One evening, as I was packing his lunch, he caught my wrist gently. Mom, he said, your hands hurt. They are just dry. It is winter. You could let me help, he offered. You already do, I said. You work hard at school. That is your part. He looked at me a moment longer, then let go. But I saw the worry in his eyes. I felt it burrow into me like a splinter. My days blurred into each other: diner, offices, sewing. My body learned to move on instinct. And my mind stayed fixed on numbers: the mortgage, the grocery bill, the next field trip fee, the shoes Evan would outgrow soon. Some mornings, when the alarm rang before sunrise, my hands would throb so badly I had to sit on the edge of the bed and breathe through it. But I stood up anyway. I washed dishes anyway. I knotted my apron anyway. I told myself I could handle it. I told myself I always had. But each night, as I curled my hands under my pillow to hide the aching from even myself, I wondered how much more they could take. The letter came home on a Tuesday. Evan unfolded it at the kitchen table while I stirred a pot of soup that was thinner than I wanted it to be. Mom, he said, pushing the paper toward me. This is for the advanced math program. They want the fee by next week. The number printed there, $125, felt like a hand around my throat. You should take it. I said, your teacher said you belong in that class. He hesitated. We can skip it if it is too much. We are not skipping anything, I told him. Even though the word we felt dishonest, he lived unaware. I carried the numbers alone. The next morning after my shift at the diner, I drove straight to the school office. My apron was folded in my bag, the smell of coffee still clinging to my sleeves. I smoothed my dress and walked in, hoping my voice would hold. The school counselor, Mr. Whitlock, sat behind a desk covered with neat stacks of papers. He looked up only briefly. Yes, I am Maris Keaton, I said. Evan's mother. I wanted to talk about the fee for the advanced program. He nodded and tapped the stack in front of him. The letter went out last week. Payment is due soon. I know, I said. I was hoping I could get a little more time, maybe 2 extra weeks. I can pay it. I just need a little space. He leaned back, lacing his fingers over his stomach. Mrs. Keaton, these programs run on very tight budgets. Deadlines are set for a reason. I understand that, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Evan works very hard. This class could help him. I am not asking for a discount. I just need a little time. His eyes flicked to my hands resting on my lap, cracked from bleach and hot water. Something in his expression shifted. Not sympathy, not kindness. Pity mixed with impatience. We cannot make exceptions for everyone, he said. If you cannot pay on time, your son may have to wait until next year. He will not wait, I said, surprising myself with the firmness of it. He is ready now, Mr. Whitlock sighed. Mrs. Keaton, I know how difficult things can be for families in transitional situations. The phrase stung like a slap. Transitional, you know, after a loss. After financial hardship, my cheeks burned. I lost my husband, I said quietly, but my son has not lost his chance. He blinked, startled, then shuffled papers to avoid meeting my eyes. Very well, I will give you an extension. 2 weeks. But please make sure the payment is prompt. I will, I said, though it felt more like swallowing something heavy than speaking. He slid a form across the desk. Sign here. It confirms you understand the conditions. My hand trembled as I signed. Pride is a fragile thing. It can crack without making a sound. When I stepped into the hallway, I saw Evan standing by the lockers. His backpack hung off one shoulder, and his face was pale. Mom, he whispered. I did not mean to overhear. You should be in class, I said softly. He stared at me, eyes filled with something older than he was meant to feel. You should not have to ask them for anything. I put a hand on his cheek. I will do whatever I need to. For you, I will always do it. He pressed his lips together like he wanted to argue but did not know how. He only took my hand in his and held it tighter than he ever had before. We walked to the car slowly, his fingers gripping mine, both of us carrying more than just a signed form. When Evan got his acceptance letter to community college, he laid it on the kitchen table like it was something fragile. Mom, he said, voice trembling with excitement he tried to hide. I did it. They want me. I touched the edge of the paper. Of course they want you. But even as I smiled, numbers crowded the back of my mind. Tuition, books, transit passes, everything that stacked itself between a boy and the life he deserved. That night, after Evan went to bed, I opened the drawer where I kept Henry's things. The house was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the soft tick of the kitchen clock. I lifted the small velvet pouch heavy with its own history, and then the wooden box of stamps he had collected since he was a child. I held the pocket watch first. Henry used to polish it on Sunday evenings, turning it over in his hands like it carried more years than its brass casing could hold. Inside the lid, he had carved my initials when we first met. I ran my thumb over the marks. I am sorry, Henry, I whispered. I know what this meant to you. The next morning, I told Evan I had an extra shift. Instead, I took a bus across town to a shop owned by an older man named Denton. He knew me from the diner. He greeted me softly, as if he already understood why I had come. Maris, he said, you sure about this? I need the money, I replied, and I need it soon. He opened the pouch, then the wooden box. His fingers were careful, respectful. These are worth something, he said gently. Not a fortune, but something. Enough to help my son start school. He nodded. Enough for his first semester, yes. He counted the money in slow bills as though giving me time to change my mind. I did not, when he placed the envelope in my hands. I felt both relief and a hollowness I did not want to name. That evening, Evan found me in the kitchen, placing the envelope into a drawer. "What is that?" he asked. "Something for you," I said. "For school?" His eyes widened. "Mom, how did you get this?" "It is savings." I lied. "Leftover from last year." I set it aside. He blinked, and something hopeful rose in him. "You saved all this I did." I said quietly, "For you." He wrapped his arms around me, holding tighter than he ever had. "Thank you," he murmured into my shoulder. "I promise I will make this worth it." I pressed my cheek against his hair. "I know you will." I did not look at the empty space in the drawer where Henry's things had rested for decades. I did not think about the watch, or the stamps, or the life we built before the world took him. All I saw was Evan, stepping closer to a future that no longer lived inside Pittsburgh's shrinking streets. It was enough. Evan left for community college on a cool August morning with one duffel bag and a box of books. The campus was only 40 minutes away, but it felt like another continent. I watched him adjust the strap on his shoulder, his face set in that serious way he had when he was concentrating too hard. "You call me," I said, smoothing a wrinkle from his sleeve. "Even if it is just about what you had for lunch?" He laughed. "No one wants to hear about cafeteria food." "Mom, I do." I said, "I want to hear everything." He leaned in and kissed my cheek. "I will make this worth it. I promise." He did. At first, he called late at night when the dorm hallways were finally quiet. I would be at the kitchen table with my sewing, the phone tucked against my shoulder. "Intro classes are easy," he said once. "The real stuff is in the computer lab. They have servers. Mom, real ones. Not just the junk I used to take apart in the basement. If anyone can understand them, it is you," I told him. He groaned softly. "You say that like it is simple." "It is simple," I said. "You are good at this." There was a pause, and I heard him breathe out, the sound steadying both of us. By his second year, he started talking about transferring. "There is a program in Boston," he said over the phone. "Their computer science department is strong. They have labs, research, internships, the whole thing. Boston is far." I said, "Farther than the 40 minutes I am now," he replied. "But closer to the work I want to do." He came home that weekend with pamphlets and printouts, his eyes lit from the inside. We spread the papers on the kitchen table where he had done his homework since grade school. "Look," he said, tapping charts and course lists. "They focus on systems that handle thousands of users, financial platforms, secure transactions. I keep thinking about people like us. Families who never had a safety net. I want to build something for them. Then you should go." I said. He frowned. "You do not know how much it costs." "I know enough." I replied. "You have scholarships. You have grants. You have your grades. And you have me." "Mom," he began. I lifted a hand. "We will find a way." He transferred the next fall. The night before he left, he stood in the doorway of Henry's old room, now mostly storage and boxes. "Do you think Dad would be proud?" he asked quietly. If he saw me going so far from home, I stepped beside him, looking at the shadows on the walls. "Your father wanted one thing, for you to stand somewhere he did not get the chance to stand. He would be proud if that place was across town or across the ocean." Evan swallowed hard and nodded. Boston moved fast. He called less often, not because he forgot me, but because his days filled up. Group projects, labs that ran past midnight, part-time work in a campus tech center. One evening he called while I was wiping down the diner counter. "Mom," he said, voice buzzing with an energy I had not heard since he was a little boy with a new library card. "A professor introduced me to a guy who runs a small investment firm. They are looking at student projects." "Did you show him yours?" I asked. "Not yet," he said. I am still building it. But I told him my idea. An app that helps people track every bill, every debt, with reminders and warnings before things get late. No hidden fees, no surprises. A way to see trouble coming instead of waking up to it. He hesitated. I told him about us. About the loan after Dad died. About the hospital bills. He called it a sad little origin story. My hand tightened around the damp cloth. What did you say back? I told him it was not a story. Evan answered. It is what happened. There was a beat of silence. Anyway, he went on. They laughed when I said I grew up in a Pittsburgh factory neighborhood. One of them said he liked the authenticity, said it would play well in marketing. He tried to make it sound light. He did not quite manage. You do not exist to decorate someone's portfolio, I said. I know, he replied. That is why I will build this my way. Months turned into a year. Then more. Evan finished his degree, but by then, he was already working nearly full-time on the app. He slept on a friend's couch. He coded in borrowed office corners. He pitched to people in suits who mispronounced our last name and clapped him on the shoulder like he was a clever pet. They keep asking who my target users are, he said during one late call. I tell them the truth. Families like ours, people one broken furnace away from losing everything. Do they listen? I asked. Some do, he said. Some only hear numbers. The first time he told me an investor had actually wired money into his little company's account, his voice shook. It is not much, he said, but it is enough to hire one engineer and stop pretending I am not running a business. That sounds like more than enough, I replied. They still call me the factory kid, he added. The Pittsburgh Project, but they also call back. That is what matters for now. I could not see his face through the phone, but I could imagine it, the set of his jaw, the stubborn tilt of his chin. Evan was climbing, out of the valley where we had been stuck for so long, up into glass towers and polished rooms where people spoke a different language, a language made of interest rates and valuations. Even from my kitchen table, miles away, I could feel the distance stretching and pulling between those two worlds as he rose. The first time Evan called to say he wanted to fly me to Boston, I thought he was joking, Mom. He said, I have the means now. Let me bring you here. First class. A real visit. I do not need first class, I replied. A bus works just fine. He laughed softly. No buses. Not this time. 2 weeks later, I stood on the tarmac of a small private airport outside the city. The wind tugging at my coat. A man in a dark uniform held a sign with my name on it. I stared at the letters Maris Keaton and wondered how a girl from a Pittsburgh row house had ended up here. Ms. Keaton, the man said politely. Evan is waiting at the penthouse. May I take your bag? It is only one, I murmured, gripping the worn handle. I can take it. I hesitated, then handed it over. Watching someone else carry my suitcase felt wrong, like breaking a rule I had lived by my entire life. The car that picked me up had seats softer than any couch I ever owned. The city blurred past the windows, tall buildings, clean sidewalks, people walking quickly with coffee cups, and confidence heavier than their clothes. When we pulled up to Evan's building, a tower of steel and glass rising into the sky, I felt my breath catch. The lobby was quiet and spotless. A woman behind a marble desk smiled at me. Welcome, Ms. Keaton. Mr. Keaton told us you would be arriving. After a lifetime of wiping marble counters for other people, being greeted on one felt unreal. The elevator shot upward so fast my stomach dipped. When the doors opened, Evan stood waiting in a crisp shirt. Sleeves rolled up, hair slightly messy like he had run his hands through it a dozen times. Mom. He pulled me into his arms, lifting me just enough that my feet shifted off the floor. "You made it. I am here," I said, trying to steady my voice. "This is quite a place," he grinned. "Just wait until you see the kitchen." The penthouse stretched out in long lines of glass and polished stone. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the whole city glowing. A woman I did not know stood by the island, arranging fruit on a tray. She looked up. "Mr. Keaton," she said. I stocked the pantry with everything on the list. Then she nodded at me. "Ms. Keaton, it is a pleasure." I flinched at the title. Ms. Keaton was a woman who belonged here. I was a woman whose hands were still cracked from bleach. Evan noticed the way I stiffened. "Mom," he said gently. "This is Carla. She helps with groceries and cleaning." I blinked. "You have help?" "Yes," he said simply. "It saves time." I tried not to stare as Carla moved through the kitchen with practiced grace. All the things I used to do, scrub sinks, fold towels, chop vegetables, were being done by someone else. And not because Evan could not do them, but because he no longer had to. "Why do you look like that?" Evan asked softly. "It is strange," I admitted. "Seeing people do work I always did myself." He touched my hand. "You do not have to do anything here. Not one thing. Just be comfortable." Comfortable? The word felt foreign. He led me to a guest room bigger than the living room of our old house. "This is yours," he said. I stood in the doorway. "Evan, this is too much." "No," he said. "It is finally enough. Later." While he took a call in his office, I walked barefoot to the window. The marble floor was cool under my feet. Smooth and perfect. I stared at my reflection, at the woman who had scrubbed floors for decades, and at the city stretched out like another world. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Evan returning, but I stayed facing the window, letting the weight of everything settle in my chest. The marble beneath me felt steady and strange all at once, like learning how to walk again. Evan invited her over the evening after I arrived, eager in a way that made me smooth my dress 3 separate times before the doorbell even rang. "Mom," he said, adjusting a sleeve. "Aurelia is excited to meet you properly. She keeps telling people how much she wants our worlds to blend." I smiled. Though a knot tightened beneath my ribs, "I will be polite. You will be yourself." He corrected gently. Then the doorbell chimed. Evan opened it with a warmth I had not seen in him since boyhood. Aurelia stepped inside like she owned the light in the room. Tall, elegant. Her dark hair pinned back in a style that looked effortless, but probably took an hour to perfect. She carried a bottle of wine in one hand and a gift bag in the other. "Maris," she said brightly, leaning in to air kiss both my cheeks. "Finally, I have heard so much about you." "And I have heard plenty about you," I replied. She laughed lightly, squeezing my hands. "Evan talks about his mother all the time. I feel like I already know you." Her hands were soft, too soft. The kind of hands that had never scraped ice from a windshield or scrubbed a bathroom floor. "I brought you a little something," she said, offering the bag. Inside was a scarf silk, pale pink, delicate as breath. "This color lights up the skin. You will love it." "It is lovely," I said. "Thank you." "It is a bit more modern," she added, lowering her voice. "We can work on updating your wardrobe little by little." Before I could respond, Evan returned with glasses. "Look at you two bonding already." Aurelia turned to him with a smile so soft it almost erased the edge she had shown me. "Your mother has such presence," she said. "I adore her." I watched the way he looked at her, hopeful, proud. I forced a smile. We sat at the table, A spread of cheeses and bread arranged so neatly it felt more like a magazine photo than a meal. Aurelia talked effortlessly about her work at an arts magazine, about gallery openings, about heritage collections and philanthropic circles. Evan listened, leaning his chin on his hand. I listened too, though some words felt like walking on ice, pretty but unstable. At one point, she turned to me. "Maris, darling, do you drink wine occasionally?" I said. She poured half an inch into my glass. "Start small. Some palates take time to adjust to good wine." Evan did not notice the comment. He was laughing at something she said about an art collector who kept a sculpture on his yacht. When he got up to grab something from the kitchen, Aurelia's smile thinned. "You and Evan are very close," she said. "We always have been. That is nice," she replied with a tone that was not nice. "But things change. Families shift. Boundaries are important." I folded my napkin. Keeping my voice steady, I raised him. "I know what boundaries are." She reached across the table and touched my wrist lightly, as if comforting a child. "I just want to help you adjust. Boston is different. People expect certain things, such as appearance," she said, eyes flicking to my dress. "Presentation, vocabulary. We can work on it together." I pulled my wrist back slowly. I did not realize I needed work. Evan returned then, oblivious. "Everything okay?" Aurelia turned that bright smile back on instantly. "Perfect," she said. "Your mother and I are getting along beautifully." He looked relieved. "Good. I want the two most important women in my life to connect." Her eyes flicked toward me, the edges glittering. "We will," she said. "I promise." The rest of the evening passed in small, polished gestures, her straightening my scarf, her correcting the way I pronounced a French cheese, her praising Evan in a tone that made him glow and made me shrink. When she left, Evan kissed her goodbye in the doorway. She whispered something in his ear that made him laugh softly. As the elevator doors closed, she looked at me once more, smile delicate, eyes sharp as cut crystal. Evan shut the door behind her. "She is wonderful, right?" I pressed my fingers against the hem of my dress. "She is something," he nodded, missing the strain in my voice. "I am glad you like her." I forced a smile he desperately wanted to see. But as I turned toward my room, the silk scarf still draped over my arm. The knot in my ribs pulled tighter. Aurelia's friends arrived dressed like they had stepped out of some glossy magazine shoes that clicked sharply against the floor. Clothes that fit like they had been sewn directly onto their bodies. Evan seemed excited, rushing between the kitchen and living room, trying to make everything perfect. "Mom," he said, handing me a folded napkin. "Just sit and enjoy. You do not have to help tonight." "I can carry a plate," I replied. Aurelia slid between us, smiling too sweetly. "Let her relax, Evan. This is her chance to just observe." The way she said observe made my spine stiffen. Still, I nodded and took my seat at the long dining table. Aurelia sat at the head, Evan beside her. I was placed halfway down the table between two women whose perfume was so strong it felt like a wall. One of them leaned toward me. "So, Maris, is this your first time in Boston?" "Yes," I said. "My first real visit." "How wonderful," she replied, but her eyes had already moved elsewhere. A waiter someone hired through the catering service Aurelia insisted on began setting the table formally. Forks, knives, spoons, all arranged with delicate precision. I stared at the lineup. More silverware than I had ever used in my life. Evan caught my hesitation and gave me a reassuring smile. "Just follow my lead," he mouthed. The first course arrived, some thin soup with a name I could not pronounce. Conversation rose and fell around me like waves I could not quite catch. I focused on the one spoon that seemed logical. I reached for it, and then it slipped. A clean, metallic clatter echoed through the room, louder than it should have been. Every face turned. I froze, the spoon resting crooked on my plate. Aurelia's laughter came first, a bright, tinkling sound that did not reach her eyes. "Oh, Maris," she said loudly enough for the entire table to hear. "We are using the Tiffany silver, not the tin spoons from the diner." The table erupted into polite, uncomfortable chuckles. Someone hid a smile behind a wine glass. Another cleared his throat and looked away. Heat crawled up my neck. My fingers tightened on the edge of the tablecloth. "I am sorry," I said quietly. Evan sat straighter, his eyes narrowing just a fraction. "That was not funny." "Aurelia." "Oh, relax," she said, reaching over to pat his arm. "I was just teasing. You know I adore your mother." But her eyes slid to mine sharp, satisfied. One of her friends chimed in. "It happens to all of us." "Maris, formal dining can be intimidating." "Thank you," I murmured, though the words scratched my throat. Evan leaned closer to Aurelia. "You did not have to say it like that." She smiled at him, radiant and practiced. "Evan, darling, it was a joke. Your mother knows that." I kept my gaze on my plate, on the soup swirling gently inside the bowl. Evan looked at me, worry flickering behind his eyes. "Mom, are you all right?" "I am fine," I lied. Aurelia's smile brightened. "See, she is fine." "You worry too much," conversation resumed, but everything felt heavier. Every laugh felt directed at me. Every whisper brushed like a draft against the back of my neck. I lifted the spoon again carefully, silently, and tried to eat. My hand trembled despite my effort to hide it. Evan watched me for a long moment. He did not say anything more to Aurelia, but something in him shifted, just slightly, like the first crack in a piece of glass no one had noticed was under strain. Later that night, as the guests left and Aurelia kissed Evan on the cheek, she glanced at me with the same polished sweetness she had worn all evening. "Thank you for joining us, Maris," she said softly. "Next time, I will make sure the table is simpler." I smiled back even though my jaw felt tight. Evan walked me to my room, his hand warm on my shoulder. "Mom," he said, "if anyone made you uncomfortable, I am all right." I said, "Good night, Evan." He lingered a moment, searching my face like he was trying to hear something I had not said aloud. But I gave him nothing. Not yet. The morning of the wedding began before the sun rose. I woke to voices echoing through the penthouse. Aurelia's mother directing vendors, her father speaking sharply on the phone. Planners rushing from room to room like they owned every corner of the place. I stepped out into the hallway. Smoothing my dress, a young woman with a clipboard nearly bumped into me. "Oh, sorry," she said breathlessly. "You must be one of the house staff. Could you help bring these down to the car? I am the groom's mother," I said quietly. Her face flushed. "Oh, I did not know." She hurried away before I could say another word. In the living room, Aurelia's mother stood surrounded by garment bags. She glanced at me briefly. "Maris, dear, the family photos will be taken later. Stay close by and we will call for you when we need you. Call for me." Like I was a substitute waiting for instructions. "Where is Evan?" I asked. "Busy," she replied, waving her hand. "He has meetings with the officiant, the photographer, the planner, so many details." I tried to follow the bustle, but everything moved too quickly. Like I had walked into a rehearsal I had not been invited to. Aurelia appeared from the bedroom in a silk robe, her hair pinned up, makeup artists circling her like bees. She looked beautiful, effortlessly. Impossibly beautiful. Maris, she said, giving me a bright, strained smile. Today is going to be perfect. Just try to stay where people can find you. All right, things get chaotic otherwise. I would like to see Evan, I said. Her smile tightened. He will come when he can. But hours passed. I waited near the windows while planners scurried around me. No one spoke to me except to ask me to move a little left, or stand aside, or let someone through with flowers twice as expensive as the furniture I used to polish. Finally, Evan rushed in, fastening his cufflinks. He looked tired, pale around the edges. Mom, he said, walking straight to me. I am sorry. It has been a whirlwind. I touched his arm. Are you all right? He let out a breath. Just a lot to manage. Aurelia's father called from across the room. Evan, we need you. Now. Evan squeezed my hand once before backing away. I will find you later. Promise. And he was gone again. Aurelia swept by next, surrounded by her bridesmaids. Maris, the shuttle for family leaves soon. You are in the second group. The second I asked, she paused, blinking as if confused why I cared. There were space issues. It is not a big deal, but it felt like one. The groom's mother riding behind the groom's friends. When I reached the museum, I stepped out of the shuttle alone. Guests were already gathering, all shimmer and confidence. A coordinator held a clipboard and called names for seating arrangements. Maris Keaton, she asked without looking up. Yes. You are in row 4, right side. Row 4, not front, not family row, row 4. Something in my chest tightened as I took my seat. Around me, guests chattered, laughed, adjusted their clothes, and for the first time that day, the truth settled quietly, heavily. Into my bones, I did not feel like the groom's mother. I felt like someone hired to fill a seat. The reception hall shimmered with lights that felt too bright for my eyes. People drifted in every direction, dresses rustling, champagne glasses clinking. Evan was pulled between guests like a thread through fabric, smiling, thanking, shaking hands. I tried to stay out of the way, standing near a tall arrangement of flowers. No one spoke to me except to nod politely before turning back to richer conversations. A young man, barely 20, maybe wove through the crowd with a tray stacked too high with champagne flutes. His shoulders shook under the weight. I could see his fingers whitening where they gripped the metal. He glanced around desperately, as if praying someone would notice. I stepped forward before I could think. Let me steady that for you, son, I said. It is too heavy. His relief was immediate. Thank you. Ma'am, I was afraid I was going to drop the whole thing. I placed my hands on the edge of the tray, letting it balance across both of us. For a moment, it worked. The trembling eased. But when I stepped back, my heel caught the edge of the ornate rug, a small lift of fabric, just enough. My ankle twisted. The tray jerked, and then the glasses flew. A dozen crystal flutes, fragile, glittering, tumbled through the air. Time stretched into something slow and merciless. They struck Aurelia's gown in a cascade of cold liquid and shards of sound. Champagne splashed across the white silk, blooming like a spreading stain. Drops clung to her bodice, ran down her skirt, dripped onto the floor. I froze. My hands hovered uselessly in the air. The boy clasped his mouth with both hands, eyes enormous. The entire room went silent. Even the music faltered. Aurelia stared down at her dress as though it were bleeding. Then she lifted her head. The look she gave me did not belong at a wedding, not at any celebration, meant to honor love. What did you do? She screamed. What did you just do? I am so sorry, I whispered. I was trying to do not speak to me, she snapped, stepping closer. You ruined my dress. Do you have any idea how much this cost? She jabbed a finger toward me. You clumsy. Backwater, I flinched. Aurelia, please, My apology died under the slap. It cracked across my cheek so hard the world tilted. My hand flew up to steady myself, but all I felt was heat radiating through my skin. Gasps rippled through the room. Someone dropped a fork. Someone whispered my name. Questions hovering like smoke. But Aurelia did not hesitate. She loomed over me, trembling with fury. Get away from me, she said. I do not even know who let you in here. Security should have kept people like you in the back. People like me. The words hit harder than the slap. I opened my mouth, but the young server stepped forward. It was my fault. He stammered. She was helping me. Aurelia shot him a glare sharp enough to cut. I do not want excuses. Behind me. Chairs scraped. Phones rose. Guests whispered, uncertain, afraid to choose sides. I tried to steady my breathing, tried to gather the pieces of myself still glass sharp on the floor, and then I heard Evan's voice. It came from across the hall, low, cold, carrying more weight than the chandeliers overhead. Aurelia, he said, what did you just do? The room shifted toward him, every eye snapping to the groom who stood frozen in disbelief, and I knew in that moment my son had seen everything. The sting on my cheek was still spreading when Aurelia's voice rose again, sharp enough to cut the air. Get her out of here, she barked. I do not care where she came from. Staff belongs in the back. Staff. She said it like dirt under her heel. I tried to speak. Aurelia, I was only... She stepped closer, eyes blazing. Do not say my name. You are clumsy. You ruined my dress, and you have no business being near my guests. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone whispered, Is she serious? The young server tried to defend me. She helped me enough. Aurelia snapped. Her hand rose again. But this time, she froze halfway through the air, because Evan's voice, cold, steady, and louder than the violin quartet, cut through the room. Aurelia. Everything stopped. Even Aurelia's breathing. Evan stepped forward, setting his champagne down with deliberate calm. Explain exactly what you think you are doing. She ruined everything, Aurelia stammered. She is staff. Evan, I do not know why she was even... She is my mother. The words dropped like iron. A gasp rolled across the hall. Cameras lifted. Someone whispered. Oh my God. Aurelia's face went pale. You're... What? No, Evan. She never said. You greeted her earlier, he said, twice. I did not know she was cleaning the floor. She was picking up the glass you shattered. His voice hardened. You hit her. Aurelia blinked rapidly, voice shaking. Evan, please, I was overwhelmed. Let us talk privately. No. He turned to the crowd, then back to her. You will apologize to my mother. Now. Aurelia looked around, searching for someone to save her. But every guest stepped back. Phones recorded. No one spoke for her. She swallowed. Evan, you are humiliating me. You humiliated yourself, he said. And this marriage is over. Her knees buckled. You cannot mean that. But Evan did not answer. He moved to my side, placed his jacket on my shoulders, and guided me toward the exit while the hall buzzed with shock and whispers. Behind us, the cameras kept rolling. I woke up the next morning in the guest room of a quiet hotel Evan had moved us to after the reception collapsed. My cheek still throbbed. I touched it gently, feeling the faint outline of fingers. Evan knocked once before opening the door. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, jaw clenched tight. Mom, he said softly, you should see this. Or maybe you should not. I do not know. He held out his phone. A paused video filled the screen. My face, blurred slightly. My body bent over broken glass. Aurelia's arm raised. The slap. I exhaled slowly. Someone filmed it. Everyone filmed it. He replied, "It is everywhere." He tapped the screen. The video played. Not long, not dramatic by movie standards, but real, too real. The sound of the slap echoed sharper through the speakers than it had in the room. Comments scrolled beneath it. She hit his mother. Pure arrogance. That woman has the patience of a saint. Evan rubbed his forehead. Mom, you have no idea how bad it is for her already. But I did. His voice gave it away. He swiped to another page articles. Headlines. The wedding slap seen around the internet? Is this the end of Boston's darling art critic, a bride's fall from grace? I sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. What happened? People started digging, he said. Brands she works with. Galleries. Charities. They are cutting ties quietly. He hesitated. And they are praising you. Me, he nodded. They call you dignified, graceful under cruelty. Some writer called you a symbol of working-class strength. I pressed my palms together. Evan, I do not want to be a symbol. I did not ask for this. I know. He paced to the window and back, but they are tearing her apart. She is losing partnerships, invitations, everything she built. There was something tight in his voice, anger wrapped in guilt. Evan, I said gently, you cannot fix the internet. I do not want to fix it, he snapped. Then he stopped himself. I do not know how to feel. I stood and placed a hand on his arm. You protected me. You did what any decent man should do. He looked at me, eyes troubled. She hit you, Mom, in front of everyone. I cannot forgive that. I am not asking you to forgive her, I said quietly, but do not let this turn you into someone who enjoys watching her fall. He swallowed hard. I do not. Good, I whispered, because pain is heavy. Do not carry hers on top of your own. He nodded slowly, as if the weight of the moment was settling into his bones. Outside, the world was still staring at the video, replaying the slap frame by frame. Inside the room, my son stood torn between rage and something much harder to name. And I knew the days ahead would test both of us in ways the internet would never see. Evan drove the whole way to Gloucester with both hands tight on the steering wheel, as if the road might vanish if he looked away. I watched the city shrink behind us, glass and steel dissolving into smaller streets. Quieter spaces. Open sky. It is temporary, he said for the third time. Just until everything settles. I know, I replied, though I could feel the relief in my bones already. When we pulled up to the little rental house, the harbor breeze met us first cold, salty, clean. The house sat on a small hill, white paint a little chipped, porch light flickering weakly. It looked lived in, the kind of place where people exhaled rather than performed. It is not fancy, Evan said, grabbing my suitcase, but we will have privacy. No reporters. No cameras, no noise. It is perfect, I said. Inside, the house smelled like old wood and lemon cleaner. Evan set my bag down in the bedroom and rubbed the back of his neck. Mom, I know the last few days were a lot. That is one word for it, I murmured. He sat at the foot of the bed, shoulders slumping for the first time since the wedding. I keep replaying it. He said, her hand, your face, the way people just stood there. I sat beside him, Evan. Stop hurting yourself with it. He shook his head. She deserved consequences. She received them, I said, more than she expected. He looked at me, then really looked, and his voice softened. You deserved better than all of it. We spent the afternoon unpacking what little we brought. Evan put cereal in the pantry like he used to when he was a teenager. I placed my sewing kit in a drawer, though I doubted I would need it much here. As evening settled, he came to the kitchen holding 2 grocery bags. I thought we could cook tonight. Something simple. You cooking? I teased. Should I call a doctor? He laughed. The tension cracking just a little. I can boil water. Possibly. We made pasta with tomatoes and garlic. Nothing fancy. The kind of meal Henry used to request after a long shift. While I stirred the pot, Evan leaned against the counter watching me. This feels normal, he said. Better than anything has felt in weeks. It does. I agreed. After dinner, we sat on the porch listening to the harbor sounds, gulls calling, boat masts clinking gently. Evan wrapped his jacket around his arms and stared out at the water. I have been thinking, he said. I want to slow down a bit, work less, not be in that office from morning to midnight anymore. You built something important. I said, I built it because of you. I felt my throat tighten. Evan, he cut me off softly. Mom, you gave up everything. I never really understood it. Not fully. Not until I saw someone hit you and treat you like you were beneath her. I cannot keep living in a world where people think that behavior is normal. I touched his hand. Evan, one person's cruelty does not define the world. No, he said, but your kindness does. The words landed with a weight I was not prepared for. We sat in silence for a long time, listening to the harbor breathe. The wind carried a chill, but it felt clean, freeing. He glanced at me. We are going to be okay. Right, I nodded. We already are? But inside, I felt a quiet tremble because when the noise finally faded, what remained between a mother and her son was something deeper, quieter, and far more fragile than either of us had realized. I started volunteering at the soup kitchen because my hands needed something to do. Stirring pots, passing plates, greeting people who had lost more than I ever had. It steadied me in a way the quiet house in Gloucester could not. One afternoon, while I was ladling vegetable soup into bowls, I heard a soft voice in the line, Maris. I looked up. Aurelia stood 3 people back. She was thinner, cheekbones sharp, hair pulled into a messy knot, coat too big on her frame. Her hands trembled where she held them clasped. Her eyes, once bright with entitlement, were hollow now. She stepped forward when it was her turn, breath uneven. I did not know you volunteered here. I come most days. I said, people need to eat. She swallowed hard. Maris, I am sorry. Her voice broke. I do not know how I became someone capable of hurting you. I do not know how I let myself fall so far. I set the ladle down and wiped my hands on my apron. For a moment, we simply looked at each other. 2 women who had walked through the same fire but carried very different burns. I cannot erase what happened, she whispered, and I cannot ask you to forgive me. I just needed you to hear me say that I was wrong. Her eyes filled, but she held herself still. I hear you, I said quietly. She let out a shaky breath. I ruined everything. You did. I answered honestly, and you are paying for it. But pain does not have to turn you cruel again. I picked up a bowl, filled it generously, and placed a piece of bread beside it. Then I set it in her hands. Eat, I said. You look too thin. Aurelia stared at the bowl as if it were something precious. Thank you, she whispered, but I did not touch her arm. I did not offer comfort. I did not feel. Some wounds mend, some become reminders. As she walked to a table in the corner, I turned back to the soup pot, letting the warmth rise into my face. Because forgiveness, I realized, does not mean forgetting it means choosing not to strike back. The evening air in Gloucester was cool, brushing gently against my face as I stepped onto the small balcony. The harbor stretched out in front of me, dotted with lights that swayed softly with the tide. I rested my elbows on the railing, letting the quiet settle into my bones. Evan joined me a moment later. He did not speak at first, just stood beside me, his shoulder almost touching mine. Then he exhaled slowly. "Mom," he said quietly, "I have been thinking about everything. The wedding, the fallout, the years before that." I kept my eyes on the water. "You do not need to explain anything to me." "I do," he insisted, "because I never said thank you. Not properly. Not for the nights you worked late. Not for the mornings you went to the diner half asleep. Not for the hands that did everything so I could have something." He reached for my hand then, turning it palm up. The calluses were softer now, but still visible little scars of a life spent holding things together. "I built a company," he said, eyes shining. "But you built me." My throat tightened. "Evan, I did what mothers do." He shook his head. "You did more." We stood there, the wind carrying the faint scent of salt and wood smoke. I looked down at my hands, these hands that once scrubbed office floors at midnight, mended clothes by lamplight, and steadied a champagne tray that changed everything. And now they held my son's gratitude, warm and steady. "You made it worth it," I whispered. He wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "I hope I can make you proud every day from here on." "You already have," I said. The harbor lights flickered below us, and for the first time in a long while, I felt something close to peace. If this story touched you, stay with us, subscribe, and follow for more stories that honor the hands that build the people we become.